Any stories shared in this podcast have had names and details changed for the confidentiality of clients. Any resemblance to someone real is coincidental. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's episode. Today, we're going to talk about another thing that can stop you from progressing in therapy. We're going to talk about why therapy doesn't work sometimes if you don't have support outside of therapy. I think for a lot of people, going to therapy, for most people, I would say, going to therapy is like a pretty private thing. I have some clients who will tell everyone and scream from the roofs that they're in therapy. But for a lot of my clients, I think it's something they like to keep pretty private, which is understandable. But why is it so important that we do have some level of support outside of therapy when it comes to our mental health stuff?
Well, I've found it interesting over the years because I think of the private portion of it. I always find it intriguing that when things get out of whack, we will seek out therapy. And sometimes it's hard to get homework done as a therapist giving clients homework. Sometimes they'll come back and homework isn't done. And I find it intriguing that we will take, 30-minute drive time, hour session with me, 30-minute drive time home, and sometimes the homework isn't practiced, right? And so there's something about coming to therapy, and these clients will still say that therapy is beneficial for them, even if the homework's not being done. And I will say, I do see progress. And I think part of it is because there's a relationship that they're able to talk about hard things, and they have a place to go of somebody who's understanding and who's supportive of them. And so I sometimes get stuck on now imagine if you had a lot of support and it wasn't just one therapist. Like, what if you had friends that did this, or what if you had acquaintances here, or peer pressure in a good way there. And so I actually think the idea of having support is very helpful because you actually get to talk about things. You actually get to have relationships and bounce ideas off of someone else, which sometimes is what happens in therapy, right?
Yeah.
So I think that it's the ability to communicate, to talk about, express how you feel, and sometimes even receive feedback from other people. But it's hard to talk about some of those things that maybe you can talk about in therapy outside of therapy.
Yeah. So maybe if I'm understanding you right, if you have some of this outside support who can do a lot of the validating and the being there for you when you need them and those kind of things, that maybe the therapeutic relationship, that relationship with your therapist, can be more of, let's talk about the specific traumas or the homework, or get into some of those things that you don't want to necessarily share with friends and family, instead of your therapist having to do both jobs. Is that what you're saying?
Well, and perhaps even getting there quicker.
Okay.
Or when you know that when you're having a bad day, you can actually reach out to somebody. I tell my clients all the time, I'm a believer as a therapist, if my clients need something between sessions, like if you're scheduled weekly but crap hits the fan, reach out to me.
Yeah.
Now there's some regulations behind that, right? I tell them
some
all the
boundaries.
time. Yeah, I'm like, if you text me at 11 o'clock p.m., you're going to have to text a lot because I'm dead to the world at that time, and I'm a deep sleeper. But you may have a neighbor down the street who's up till all hours of the night with you, right? So yeah, I think it would help give practice on being able to talk about things that are stressful. It might give you some perspective so that when you walk into therapy, you're prepared to explore different strategies and different ways of thinking, which is something therapists do. And I think maybe even having the confidence of sharing things becomes more fluid or easier to do. And so then you end up maybe even progressing more quickly. And maybe I'll just share one little thing that might illustrate why I'm suggesting this. I'm not a super social guy. In fact, my wife and I this morning were disagreeing about my level of introvertness. She seems to think I'm extroverted. I tell her I'm very much introverted, but I can extrovert if I need to. And so I get up in the morning and I go exercise, and Every so often, somebody will walk by and make a joke that they can't stop and say hello or take time to talk because they're going to get a bill in the mail, right? And I find it really funny. But every so often, as I'm talking to someone, you'll get the question, and maybe you've got this too. Um,
Well, not at the gym because I'm actually an introvert.
you're an actual introvert, more like you just actually exercise. Um, but sometimes I'll get the question like, so as a therapist, like, who do you go to and who do you talk to? And although I believe that there's space for a therapist going to see a therapist, um, I think I've just been very, very lucky in lots of ways. But I tell my friends, like, you guys are my therapist. Now, that's because there's been a large absence of trauma in my life. There's been a large absence of mental health stuff, right? So, um, but having the ability to go sit down and talk with somebody and have good friendships, occasionally I'll go out to lunch with a buddy, just a couple of guys sitting down and having a burger. And I think that keeps us level headed. And that's why I think support is helpful outside of just these four walls and maybe a text message or an email.
Yeah,
You know?
I agree. I think there's, I don't know. I think there's always people that can support you and that will. And sometimes we have to be a little bit introspective and realize it's us that's not allowing people to support us. You know, if we feel like we don't have any support,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that's our own doing of not giving people the space to do that for one reason or another. Um, but where do you see like most of your clients finding their support?
Usually it ends up being family, and occasionally friends, but in this day and age, I think this is maybe my biased opinion, but social media, I think, does a great job at creating lack of connections,
Mm,
if I can say it that way.
less meaningful connections.
Yeah, right. Um, but I think it, I don't know what your experience has been. For me, it's been sometimes what we'll have to do in therapy, and part of the therapeutic process is working through distorted thinking patterns or whatever about building relationships and building friendships, because that ends up being a key component of anxiety treatment or depression treatment. And so sometimes it's coaching them through how do you find friends, but like actual friends and not just the hiking group that I joined on Facebook or Instagram. Where do you see most of your clients with friends
That's a good
or
question.
social relationship even?
Yeah, I definitely family. A lot of friends, especially I think with teenagers and young adults. I, 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 I think online relationships can be helpful if the end goal is to have in-person relationships. I don't think online relationships only is like sustaining enough for support. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I think back to like when we were all locked down in COVID. I was really grateful that I was able to like play games online with my friends and we were able to talk, and I was able to maintain that connection. But I don't think you can build and maintain enough of a supportive friendship if that was the only interaction we ever had. And so during COVID, it was really hard. And after that, I think it's important that you make the effort to go see these friends in person. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I think it gets really easy to just rely. Oh, I talk to my friends every night on the Xbox. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's an easy, better than nothing option. But I don't think it fulfills the same requirement. And I think it is important that we do have in person interactions when we can. Um, I find a hiking group on Facebook, but don't just talk about hiking. Like, go meet these people and go with them,
Mm-hmm.
right? Go make friends. Go make these in-person relationships with people.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. Now that you say that, a lot of my young adult men and teenage boys, I mean, they'll game with a specific person from New Jersey 3 nights a week,
Yeah,
right? And so if you're gaming with the same person, you're going to develop a relationship, and that's good. There's
yeah,
value in that,
absolutely.
right? Um, I actually think there's also other kinds of support that's needed too. So yeah, do the gaming one. Have friends there. I've got a buddy that I talked to on the phone. I mean, he's a nurse practitioner. Met him doing this work. I talked with him on the phone probably 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. I haven't seen him in person in probably 3 years, maybe even more. And man, we pick up right where we left off, and we're mostly joking at each other and calling each other out, and we're like, man, really, we ought to get together and have dinner. And we never do,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
But he has me in stitches every time we're talking on the phone, which is once a year, right?
yeah.
And I think there's place for that.
It's like we talked about before. Like if you're gonna have a well-rounded, filled out life, like there's room for both of those, but you can't put all your eggs in that basket, I think.
Mm-hmm. Now, I just want to maybe use an extreme example. This is another reason why it's important. I have somebody that I have worked with in the past who, for a myriad of reasons, is isolated from both family and mostly friends. And I've seen situations where this individual has had medical stuff that has come up, maybe even scheduled out sleep. What do they call it? Sleep tests?
Yeah, like sleep studies.
Sleep studies. Thank you. I was like, test is not the right word. Sleep studies, and part of it is she may need transportation home, right? She's like, well, I can get myself there, but there is no ability to connect with a child or a friend that will bring this individual home. And that's sad to me.
Yeah.
And so this, I think, is part of the importance. Another area that I think I have found to be extremely helpful in having support outside is working with women who might have, I guess in the olden days it was called baby blues.
Sure.
Or, it's like after having a child, there's this depression that kind of sets in, and
Yeah.
you might start to think you're crazy until you realize you probably, if you just talk to your neighbor, they probably experienced something similar.
Sure.
And I think situations like that can be very helpful, just to have some support. An individual in our neighborhood reached out to my wife and was like, hey, my husband's going to be at work and I have this thing that I got to go to. Any chance that you could watch our little boy for a couple of hours? Like, that's helpful. That's important. Anyway, I'm rambling, but I think that's the idea of support, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I think maybe as a closing note, like I don't want this to come across like, well, if you don't have support, you're out of luck, I guess. If you have no friends and family.
Sure.
There's definitely work you can do, but I also think it's a valuable and worthwhile treatment goal. Talk to your therapist about, how do I build some relationships? Like, brainstorm some ideas of how you can find people to meet and be more social and find these supports, because I think it's something I talk about quite a bit in therapy, actually, with people.
Yep. If you have people that you have like-minded viewpoints, thoughts, you have like-minded goals, maybe direction in life, it helps when you find yourself stuck and in a rut. Somebody else that's a non-stranger can have so much benefit in pulling you out of that.
Yeah.
And so I think that sometimes it's worth looking at, if you feel like your therapy isn't progressing the way that you want it to, it might be worth looking at, well, am I just doing this all by myself? I heard a quote once that I really like, and then I will shut up after this, but it's, if you want to go somewhere quick, go alone, but if you want to go somewhere far or worthwhile, go with someone or with people. And I think that quote hits perfect on this idea today.
Yeah. Yeah, you can build the skills to find support and make those relationships. Maybe that's where you're at, right? Is that you need to still learn those skills, but we can start as small as we need to and work our way there.
Yep.
But it's an important thing.
For sure.
For sure. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us for today's video, and we will see you on the next one.
Thanks.
If you enjoyed today's video, please like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. We've got other videos for you to check out and more exciting things coming soon, so thank you.